Another important landmark judgment relating to Article 21 and in particularly relating to solitary confinement and prisoners' rights as under the Prison Act of 1894 was delivered in the important landmark judgment delivered by Supreme Court in Sunil Batra vs. Delhi administration. It also relate around prison reform. So the very introduction about the case of Sunil Batra versus Delhi administration is one of the significant milestones in Indian legal and constitutional history wherein rights of prisoners are concerned and issues related to the penal systems are exposed. The court here dealt with the treatment and harassment of a death row inmate by highlighting the difference in the Prison Act of 1894 and constitutional rights guaranteed under the Constitution of India. Therefore, an analysis of the case is hereby conducted focusing on the background of the legal argument standards and the judgment delivered. So the very background of the case or the facts relating to the case is relating to human right violations in prison and violations of Article 14 and Article 1921 of the Constitutions, which are explicitly provides right to equality and fundamental freedoms and right to life and personal liberty. So, in this particular case, petitioner Sunil Batra, a condemned prisoner in Tihar jail, wrote a letter to the Supreme Court alleging abuse by prison authorities, where the petitioner alleged that prison guards had tortured him to extort money from his family. His letter to the Supreme Court became turned into a habeas corpus petition as falling under Article 32 of the Fundamental Rights, providing writ jurisdiction and eventually into a case for public interest litigation. The case brought to light the extreme human rights violation within Indian prisons, in particularly the RJL in New Delhi, which included sexual abuse, torture, and total neglect towards prisoners. Issues in the case questioned whether the prison statute, such as solitary confinement under the Prison Act of 1894, were against the basic fundamental rights as laid down under the Constitution of India, relating to, in particularly, Article 14, Article 19, and Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So the key issues involved here, the Supreme Court's jurisdiction trialing such cases and issues relating to fundamental rights and the violation of Section 30 and Section 56 of the Prisons Act of 1894. The jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to entertain the petition of a convict under Article 32 on the ground that right of the principals are being breached within the prison premises. Further applicability of the fundamental rights, in particularly Article 14, which state relates to equality, right to equality and equality before the law. Article 9 relating to fundamental freedoms such as freedom of speech and expression, etc. And while Article 21, which relates to protection of life and personal liberty, whether they are applicable to the condemned prisoners or inmates in a prison. Then there is the violation of the Prisons Act 1894 in relation to solitary confinement as provided under Section 30 subsection 2 and the punitive action under Section 56 of the Prisons Act 1894 was questioned to violate the very provisions of Article 14 and 21 of the Indian Constitution. So the arguments of the petitioner as laid down in this particular hearing of the landmark case, the petitioner's argument that jail inmates do retain many basic liberties and that detaining a person in jail did not render them devoid of their fundamental rights. Further, the petitioner raised the issues torturing or solitary confinement of a prisoner whose sentence was not yet final was not authorized under the Prison Act of 1894, so Section 30 subsection 2 violated Article 14 because prison authorities were granted much room at the level of prescriptive directions. Further, the issue relating to Article 21 in relation to protection of life extend to something more than mere survival. There is human need for human treatment. And as while the very argument standard by the respondent, that is the Delhi administration, which argued that detention lawfully restricts some civil liberties. Solitary confinement is used to send a message to the inmates against self-harm as well as harm to others. Further, the liberty of the prisoner was curtailed to preserve that sort of order and security inside the prison walls. And finally, you would analyze the very judgment delivered and also the very conclusion of this important leading case, that is Sunil Batra vs. Delhi administration. So the very bench comprising of Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer, Justice Y.V. Chandrachud, Justice Said Murtaz Fadal Ali, Justice P.N. Singhal, and Justice D.A. Desai of this constitutional bench decreed partially in favor of the petitioner. The judgment laid down that prisoners' rights recognize the court confirmed its jurisdiction under Article 32 and 226 of having its authority hearing fundamental rights violated even by the convicts. The court found that prisoners retain certain constitutional rights, including human treatment under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, which guaranteed right to life and personal liberty, and on solitary requirement, the court held that Section 30, subsection 2 of the Prison Act 1894 did not per se infringe Article 14 and 21. It, however, clarified it must not be used to torture prisoners inasmuch as the sentence for Sunil Batra was not of capital punishment. So Batra must not have been kept in solitary confinement without further court approval. And further, the judgment relates to disciplinary measures and restraints. The apex court avails the right of prison authorities to impose restraints under Section 56, but ensure that these measures should be authorized by the local government or the court, and not arbitrarily carried out by the prison authorities. And further, the apex court in its judgment made a serious observation that there is an urgent need of prison reforms. So the court condemned the outdated and inhuman conditions prevailing in the prisons and demanded immediate reforms in the Prison Act of 1894, transparency in grievance procedures, and better treatment of prisoners. And finally, would like to conclude the very judgment as relating to Sunil Batra versus Delhi administration, where it reiterated the sentence of this very stance of judiciary over the human treatment concerning all individuals, which includes prisoners as well. There is now a very profound precedent setting ruling for the treatment of prisoners in rights bearing capacities rather than as state property. It declares that nothing that goes to constitute a sentence is going to strip a prisoner of his or her fundamental rights, which are guaranteed under the Constitution of India. The judgment paved the way for more human treatment and broad prison reforms to attention making legal protection of prisoners under India's constitutional framework, which are enforceable under Article 32 and Article 226 relating to writ petitions and judicial review in respect to the Supreme Court and High Courts of the states, so to implement and to enforce those fundamental rights guaranteed in Part 3 of the Constitution, and in particularly Article 14, which relates to right to equality and equality before law, and Article 19, which provides guaranteed all the fundamental rights, and Article 21, which provides the guarantee regarding right to life and personal liberty, and further Article 22, which also gives protection in case of illegal arrest and detention by the state, and it is all about the judgment delivered by the constitutional bench comprising Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer, Justice Y.P. Chandrachud, and Justice Fazal Ali, and Justice Desai of the then Supreme Court's judgment was delivered in this important leading case Sunil Batra, Delhi administration, in questioning the very provisions underlined under Section 30 and Section 56 of the Prison Act of 1894, and also the questions relating to solitary confinement and whether the prisoners, even a convict, has the right regarding the very guarantee and protection as provided regarding fundamental rights as provided under the Constitution of India under Articles 14, Article 19, Article 21 and Article 22 of the Constitution, and the further important fundamental right, that is Article 32 relating to writ petitions and Article 226 regarding those writ petitions could be enforceable under the High Court and Supreme Courts, and the very issues relating to the fundamental rights, which particularly relating to human rights violations.